Vacant after midnight and otherwise exclusive, Tompkins Square Park is no longer the park where gentrification reared its ugly head in 1988. I recently saw a man observing the park from his wheelchair. He reminded me of Lincoln Swados. Lincoln was the first child of attorney Robert O. Swados and writer Sylvia Maisel. His younger sister Elizabeth is a successful writer. Sylvia suffered from depression and committed suicide in 1974. Lincoln suffered from schizophrenia. His sister is a sufferer of clinical depression. Lincoln's troubles with his mental state came to the fore in high school, where, according to rumors Elizabeth heard, he had a terrible problem with authority. Eliza was 16 when her cousin approached her at work. Her brother had apparently been hit by a train in New York City. Eliza had her doubts. Eventually, much later, she found out that her brother had attempted to commit suicide by jumping in front of a train in the subway. Lincoln's mental illness did not get in the way of his art. He eventually took up residence where artists beautifying Manhattan usually did, in the Lower East Side. They, like Lincoln, would go on to become victims of gentrification, which is a quick but gruesome act which changes entire neighborhoods into affluent areas. The process is usually a profit-driven one, carried out by developers who act on a large rent gap. A rent gap is the difference between the price an owner charges for his land and the price he could charge if the land was put to its best use. During the worst time in his life, Lincoln was forced to deal with the negative impact of such a gap. At a time Lincoln had just recovered from a broken hip, his landlady told him he would have to move as his building was going co-op. Elizabeth said of the time, "My brother was an innocent victim in a cycle of change. His beloved neighborhood was turning on him." Lincoln's eviction date was edging closer. He could not bear to leave his home of 15 years. He could not pay for another apartment either because of the escalating rents. He was faced with the possibility of homelessness. Elizabeth said of the general population and their fears of the homeless, "How far are we from losing all our money and our grace and ending up ranting on a corner, holding up a piece of cardboard over a cup?" After not paying the rent for months, Lincoln eventually lived on the streets for a while. He breathed his last breath in his apartment against the wishes of his landlady at 46 in 1989, not too long after the riots at Tompkins Square Park. The bulldozer stood by, ready to tear the walls down, and by doing so bring the curtains down on the life of yet another Manhattan artist victimized by gentrification. Lincoln's story was brought to us by the New York Times, who showed through this article that they perhaps believe that the developers instigated homelessness by trying to gentrify the city.